Everybody's attention, please. We're going to open the RTM with an open statement. This is Tom Demack, moderator, representative town meeting. This is a remote pickup, regular meeting, or special meeting of the representative town meeting. There will be a roll call attendance after the Pledge of Allegiance. The agenda, along with instructions to submit public comment for this meeting, is available on www.waterfordct.org. A recording of this meeting will be posted to the same address along with the minutes. This meeting is open to the public via YouTube Live. Members of the representative town meeting or administration are asked to listen in a mute mode to avoid background noise and echoing. If a representative town meeting member has a question, please raise your hand and you will be acknowledged. Representative town meeting members need to identify yourself when speaking. The conference call platform has a chat feature. However, the chat feature will not be used for this meeting. Thank you. This time, I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask everybody rise to salute to the flag, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'd like to call upon the town clerk. Roll call, please.
Mr. Attanasio.
Here.
Mr. Bono.
Here.
Ms. Brashali.
Here.
Ms. Cairns.
Here.
Mr. Condon.
Here.
Mr. Dembeck.
Here.
Ms. Driscoll.
Here.
Mr. Elsey.
Here.
Mr. Fioravanti.
Here.
Ms. Furry Wagner.
Here.
Mr. Gauthier. Mr. Gauthier? I'll be keeping an eye out for you, Mr. Gauthier. Mr. Goldstein.
Here.
Ms. Cole. Ms. Cole, I do see you there. Unmute yourself. I got you. Go ahead. Miss Cole. Ms. Cole? You there? Okay. Mr. Lurch?
Here.
Ms. Mativier?
Here.
Mr. Morgan?
Here.
Mr. Muckle?
Here.
Mr. O'Leary?
Here.
Mr. Olinsu?
Here.
Ms. Ritchie?
Here.
Mr. Rocchetti?
Here.
Ms. Stewart Gelinas?
Here.
Mr. Swanson? Not here. Mr. Welch Collins?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Under public comment, 3 were received during the afternoon and forwarded to all TR members. I think, Dave, we just received a 4th about
5 minutes ago.
5 minutes ago, and that was forwarded on to all members of the RTM. You should have it.
And posted on the website.
And it has been posted on the website. At this time, we'll go to IND. Consider an act upon the minutes of the April 20th, 2020 special meeting. What's your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
I think I didn't get the first.
Driscoll.
Driscoll, okay. Who made the second?
Welch Collins.
Welch Collins, thank you.
At this time, would any members of the RTM have any comments or corrections, or what's your pleasure on the minutes?
Mr. Moderator, make a motion that they be accepted as presented. Rich Muckle.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. If there are any corrections or comments, if not, we'll take them to a vote. Any comments or corrections?
No hands are raised. Yeah, just like, yeah, we can do that.
We'll take it to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? If not, the minutes from the April 20th, 2020 meeting will be accepted as presented. Next item on the agenda is item E, transaction of business of the call. Consider an act upon the general fund budget, which includes both the Board of Education and general government budgets for fiscal year July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021, in the amount of $96,460,253. At this time, I'm going to entertain a standing motion.
Mr. Moderator, Rich Muckle, Majority Leader, I offer the standing motion to move each proposed departmental budget for consideration in the order specified in the hearing schedules, with approvals of the series submittal and the department total levels, with the understanding that all totals are considered tentatively approved until final action is taken at the end of our budget hearing.
Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second on that motion?
Second.
I got Sue. Thank you.
Any discussion on the motion?
All right, I'm gonna. Yeah,
Point of order.
Tom, I'm gonna make you. I'm trying to find you, Tom Giard. I'm gonna make you the co-host, and then you can get started.
Point of information, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, Mr. Goldstein.
Town Clerk Campbell, I'm just curious. It looks like there's a phone number. I was just wondering if that was counted as an RTM member, because I know we were supposed to rename.
That's Tim Condon. I'm gonna go ahead and rename him right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, the motion is read off. The motion made, motion seconded. I'd like to take it to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? Therefore, the motion passes. Thank you. On the agenda tonight, in fact, the only thing on the agenda tonight is the Board of Education budget. At this time, I'd like to call on the Superintendent of Schools, Tom Giard, to make an open statement. And I know he sent a PowerPoint out to every member of the RTM. I think he wants to summarize that PowerPoint. John?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator Dembeck. Actually going to start off with our Board of Ed Chair as our opening comments. And hopefully you can see a screen share here up in front of you.
Yes, we're seeing that, Tom.
Yeah, it's looking good, Tom.
Thank you. All right, we're going to get started. And again, I'll hand it off to our Board of Ed Chair, Craig Merriman, for some opening comments.
Thanks, Tom. Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to present the Board of Ed budget tonight. This was approved at our meeting on February 27th, and this budget is prepared and adopted in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes, Section 10-222. Real quick from the executive summary, it says this budget will meet all of the board's statutory obligations and mandates with the goal of not compromising rigor in the classroom, supporting social and emotional learning of students, promoting continued high-quality teaching through job-embedded professional learning, all the while maintaining high expectations from our students. This budget does support our board goals, the district strategic plan, and keeps the district moving forward. The board does support the superintendent and the rest of the administration in their efforts to make Waterford a school district second to none. A couple of notes. In this budget is our last year of the community's use of schools amount in the amount of $86,126. We've had to phase that in over a period of I think it was 4 years now. So that this is the last year of that, and also our K-8 program, which is really really coming around and bringing students into the district. We're looking at returning about $51,000 or so to the town in the general fund through that program, which was initiated by Superintendent Giard. Along this process, obviously the situation that we're up against is difficult, to say the least. During the 27th meeting, the Board of Ed cut $163,000 from the Board of Ed budget. And after that, there was an additional cut of about $400,000 from the capital budget. So that's where we are at this point. And just like to say thank you to Tom and the administration for always bringing forward a budget that's fiscally responsible and helps us meet our goals. They do a fantastic job. They're very accurate with their numbers that they present to us, and we really appreciate that. And even further, I'd just like to thank them for their efforts going through what we've been through in the town and being able to get the distance learning up so quick and running so well in the food program that Tom, the administration, their staff, as well as schools and their staff have done a fantastic job. It works just a great many of hours, and we as a board support them totally. And we also are proud of our teachers, the work they've done, the paraprofessionals, the maintenance staff, the janitors, and the food service people. Everyone's done just a fantastic job, and no reason to expect they won't continue to do so. So we truly appreciate their efforts all throughout the district. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tom.
Thank you, Craig. Good evening, Mr. Moderator, RTM members, Board of Ed members, other elected officials, administrators, teachers, district staff, and community members who may be watching tonight. I would like to thank our excellent team of professionals for their hard work in the development of this budget. I am proud to present this budget on behalf of the Waterford Board of Education. In the spirit of efficiency and cognizant of the challenges of an online meeting, I will be sharing selected slides tonight as opposed to the entire 50-slide presentation I had forwarded you ahead of time. I did want you to have a copy of the entire presentation we would have given had this been in person, because I think it's important for you to see it. The remaining slides break down each section of the budget and give the backup reasons related to increases and decreases throughout the entirety of the Board of Ed budget. Each year at Convocation, I lay out a theme, a mantra of sorts that frames the year ahead. That theme is then used throughout the year as the basis for our work as a district. This year's theme, is featured on the opening slide, is, will it make the boat go faster? This mantra is about staying focused on the foundation we've built as a district and not losing sight of our mission and our goals. In the development of this budget, we asked ourselves, will this budget make our boat go faster? Will this budget help us continue to achieve our mission? Will this budget support the impressive student outcomes and results we've seen in the last several years? The answer to those questions is yes. Much has changed in the world since March 13th, 2020, when schools were closed and much of our society was closed down. We've been forced to reinvent the wheel and have been asked to duplicate an in-person environment entirely online. It has not been without challenge. Our team of administrators, teachers, and support staff have done an unbelievable job, so much so that the Connecticut State Department of Education asked us, the Waterford Public Schools, to present on a statewide webinar of our best practices in distance learning. We were one of 3 districts statewide to be asked for this honor. And while our team has done a fantastic job, the challenges do not end with schools reopening in the fall. We will be faced with new challenges. Students who will be in need of intervention, students who will be in need of additional services we don't yet know and haven't even budgeted for. We could be facing additional technology needs and personal protective equipment needs, depending on the restrictions placed on us for reopening. We will be asked to provide counseling to students whose homes face trauma during this time. We will need the necessary resources outlined in this budget to help with the recovery of our Waterford community that extends beyond the walls of our school. This budget continues both our commitment to maintain a high-quality education for our students and our responsibility of careful consideration of fiscal resources. Board of Education worked with the First Selectman and Board of Finance last month to reduce all.
I think I lost audio.
I think he accidentally muted himself.
Yeah, we lost audio.
Tom, we've lost you. Tom GR, we lost you.
I'm hearing I cut out. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, we lost you about the last minute.
Okay. As I said, much has changed in the world since March 13th, when schools closed and much of our society was closed down. We've been forced to reinvent the wheel and been asked to duplicate an in-person environment entirely online. It has not been without challenge. Our team of administrators, teachers, and support staff have done an unbelievable job, so much so that the state of Connecticut, the Connecticut State Department of Education, asked us, the Waterford Public Schools, to present on a statewide webinar on best practices in distance learning. We were one of 3 districts in the state to be asked for this honor. And while our team has done a fantastic job, the challenges do not end with schools reopening in the fall. We will be faced with new challenges. Students who will be in need of intervention, students who will be in need of additional services that we haven't even thought of or even budgeted for. We could be facing additional technology purchases and personal protective equipment purchases to meet the restrictions placed on us for reopening. We will be asked to provide counseling to students whose homes face trauma during this time. We will need the necessary resources outlined in this budget to help with the recovery of our Waterford community, a community that extends beyond the walls of our schools. This budget continues our commitment to maintain a high-quality education for our students and our responsibility of careful consideration of fiscal resources. The Board of Education worked with the First Selectman and Board of Finance last month to reduce all Board of Ed capital requests totaling $400,000 for next year. This was a necessary step and an important step in the overall fiscal picture of the town. We know the town as a whole will face challenges in recovery, and eliminating the entire Board of Ed capital request was the right decision in helping the Board of Finance get to a budget with no tax increase for the citizens of Waterford. Prior to that, the Board of Ed reduced the proposed budget by $163,000 in February, as the chair had mentioned. While we have had significant gains and impressive results in the last 5 years, we do not intend to be satisfied with the current successes. This budget invests in continued improvement is intended to promote growth and achievement. My goal tonight on behalf of the board and our team is to not only show you budget numbers, but how they translate into meaningful student outcomes, and share some of the innovative budget mitigation strategies we've employed over the last 5 years. We are a mission-driven school district. The decisions we make, the programs we implement, the dollars we ask for, the dollars we spend are directly tied to this student-centered mission. Waterford is a community that values education and views education as a collaborative effort. We know we have a moral imperative to ensure that students leave us prepared for life, learning, and work beyond school. Part of sustaining that mission is a coherent budget that enables us to progress as a district. The actions we take as a Board of Education and as a school district should actively contribute to what we do next. What we've already built will absolutely help us with what comes next. Our budget is one very observable way that tangible support is needed and vital to move forward and continue the student outcomes we are achieving. School districts require resources of time, energy, and money to continue to grow. I want to spend a few slides highlighting our success as a district that clearly indicates the investment in education this community has made is resulting in positive student outcomes. Our school district is seeing extraordinary results on many, many measures at a time when our student needs are increasing exponentially, which I will talk about in a few moments. One of the most observable ways that a district can measure their progress is performance on the SBAC assessment. SBAC is a state-mandated statewide assessment administered to students in grades 3 through 8. Waterford has seen tremendous results in recent years due to the hard work of our teachers, leaders, and most of all our students. Our continued focus on math, as highlighted in the New London Day newspaper, is evident. Increases of 52% in math in 5 years and 6% in language arts are a strong indicator that students are learning at high levels. More students than ever are seeing goal on these assessments. The Next Generation Accountability Index is another external system of metrics developed by the Connecticut State Department of Education that rates our progress and the progress of every district in the state in areas such as SBAC, other assessments, English proficiency, absenteeism, college and career readiness, graduation rates, arts and physical education, to name a few. We analyzed the 19 towns from Brantford to the Rhode Island border, and no one has made more growth than Waterford the last 3 years, as you can see on this slide. At a time when the state average only increases 1 point in those 3 years, Waterford has increased by 6.4 points. Looking at these same 19 towns, Waterford now ranks 5th after climbing from a rank of 12th 2 years ago and 10th a year ago. Waterford continues to outpace and outperform many of our peers. Let's take a look at Waterford as compared to all towns in the state of Connecticut. When we compare Waterford on the Next Generation Accountability System in the entire state of Connecticut, of all the K-12 school districts across the state, Waterford ranks at number 42, ranking ahead of districts that the state would consider to be in DIRGs A, B, and C. At number 42, this places us, Waterford, in that top tier of 30% of districts in the entire state of Connecticut. As a DIRG D district, we rank ahead of over 24 DIRG A, B, and C districts on this comprehensive set of measures that the state has deemed the district report card. Only 15 of the 54 DIRG C and D districts appear in this top 30%. Waterford is one of those 15 districts. We have much to be proud of and to celebrate. It is about growth and investment. We are fortunate to be in a community that continues to support education in so many tangible ways, and we appreciate that. One of those ways being a budget that provides for the needs of our staff and students. People often talk about return on investment. While Waterford ranks 81 of 169 towns in the state in per pupil expenditure, essentially middle of the pack, we're performing in the top 30% of all K-12 school districts in the state. Again, at a time when we're seeing increased student needs. It is truly a remarkable success story. With that said, and while we're proud of these results, we are not satisfied and know our work is never done. Connecticut's Education Commissioner, Dr. Miguel Cardona, recently said, pre-pandemic, education is the best economic driver in the state. Education will determine Connecticut's growth. That could not be more true than post-pandemic. That same statement can be said about any of the 169 municipalities in Connecticut, including Waterford. Education, the school system, is typically the primary motivator for people moving to a town, and in some instances, moving out of a town. Your investment in education matters. I want to spend a few moments talking about today's Waterford classrooms. I've mentioned student needs on a number of occasions. Today's Waterford classroom is different and has changed over the last decade. The expectations on us for what we're asked to provide our students has also changed. I offer these statistics not as numbers, but to provide a basic level of understanding about our school district in the year 2020. There are student faces behind each of these numbers. 1 in 5 of our students is deemed to be eligible for special education. 1 in 5 of our students is either on a 504 plan or on an intervention plan. Our English language learners, those students who come to us speaking no English, has more than doubled in recent years. We have over 15 worldwide languages spoken in our district every single day. Languages such as Albanian, Arabic, Cambodian, Greek, Hindi, Mandarin, Nepali, Tagalog, Urdu, Russian. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we had a student show up to one of our schools from Ecuador speaking no English. And to round out the slide, almost in one third of our families, almost 1 in 3, now is eligible for free and reduced meals. This speaks to our extraordinary results on areas such as SBAC and Next Generation at a time when our needs have shifted significantly is a credit to the hard work of our students and staff. It's important to provide you with some context related to this year's Board of Education budget. Our team just doesn't take our local budget allocation for granted, as you saw in the full PowerPoint around our pursuit of grants. Our team makes every effort to contain and control costs and pursue efficiencies. Sometimes, though, those are a cut in services, aggressive negotiations, a strategy, or a new way of thinking about these things. There are deliberate and strategic actions that have saved and will save the town of Waterford millions of dollars over the years to come. We have negotiated the elimination of salary lanes and top step in the WSCT contract. That led to our next 3 union contracts having a new lower salary schedule for all new hires in those bargaining groups. We continue to negotiate employee contracts below statewide trend. All unions but one are now in a mandatory high deductible health plan. Years ago, we terminated the Friendship School Agreement. We continue to do targeted marketing to families who've chosen to send their children elsewhere, not in an effort to convince them, but to educate them about all that Waterford Public Schools has to offer. Energy efficiency. We continue to reduce staff in alignment with enrollment trends. We've eliminated the last 2 years non-mandatory bus transportation, eliminating all out-of-town magnet transportation. And most innovative has been in the area of revenue generation, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Not on this slide are other innovative approaches such as running our own fleet of vans, reducing our use of transportation vendors that transport our out-of-town special education students. Years ago, the Board of Ed made the decision to employ a virtual server environment, allowing us to use old computers far beyond their useful life. In fact, nearly 50% of our desktop computers are older than 10 years old, and over 50% of our laptops are greater than 5 years old, employing this virtual desktop system. Over the last 5 budget cycles, the Waterford Board of Education budget has averaged 1.75% at a time of increasing costs. Factors such as inflation and CPI and collective bargaining salary trends approach 3% a year. 1.75% a year for 5 years is consistently below all of these trends. And if you go back 7 years, Board of Ed budgets have averaged 1.5%. The Board of Ed budget requests have historically been both responsible and forward-thinking, as you've seen in these slides. When building our budget, we employ a needs-based approach. What our administrators and directors submit to central office is provided to us with rationale and is carefully scrutinized and prioritized. Before the budget even went to the Board of Ed, I had already cut $516,000 from initial budget requests in areas identified as needs by our directors and principals. In areas such as staffing, technology, maintenance, professional development, software, and supplies. Board of Education reduced the budget by $163,000 on February 27th in areas such as busing, staffing, and technology. One global way to examine this budget is to look at the 6 major budget drivers in any Board of Education budget. To put these budget drivers into context, I want to share how much these lines are increasing over FY20 and how much these lines are contributing to the overall budget increase in FY21. Salaries and compensation see an increase of almost $1 million, or 3.2% over FY20, contributing to 2% of the overall 3.05% budgetary increase. Included in that are all contractual salary increases, as well as the necessary paraprofessional support to meet the needs of our increasing special ed population. Employee benefits, primarily health insurance, is up 4.81%. We're contributing almost 0.75% to the overall budget increase. Heat, energy, fuel, we're coming off historical lows of FY20, contributing to an increase of 41,000, contributing under 0.1%. Transportation, can see the increase there, up almost 5% over the previous year, 0.25%. Tuition and everything else in the entire budget, supplies, software, instructional supplies, maintenance and repair, all those other things that take to run the infrastructure of a school district, is flat from FY20 to FY21. I want to talk a little bit more about the revenue generation for the town, an extremely innovative approach that we're employing over the next several years and behind. And I'm going to ask Joe Mancini, our Director of Finance, to walk us through the next 2 slides.
Yes, good evening, everyone. All right, so economic development looks different everywhere you go, and Board of Education's are trying to find ways to increase revenue, right? And one of the ways that we can do this in this part of the state is we can charge tuition to K-8 districts. Now, K-8 districts are school systems that don't have a high school, so they have to find a location to send their students. So we've partnered up with several neighboring towns or cities and have made tuition agreements. So for 2021, we're going to charge a tuition of $12,230 per student. We're expecting 15 people. That 15 is based on active enrollments. It's not a projection. They've actually enrolled, meaning that $183,450 are going to come to the town. So that money goes to the town general fund. It doesn't come to the Board of Ed, so we're double counting anywhere. To put this into perspective on what it would mean from an economic development standpoint is it would take about a $9.4 million development to generate this much money coming into the town. So it's one of the nice things about having a very good education system in the town is it's attractive to other towns. We're actually in negotiations right now with another town as well. So the ultimate goal is to get up to about 85 students coming into this town, which will generate around $1 million. Tom, you can go to the next slide.
Yep.
All right. So while we're not trying to take credit for the revenue, there needs to be a little recognition of the revenue that's going to be coming into the town next year. So if you net that $183,000 against our 3.05%, you end up with an increase of about 2.68%. Again, we did our best and look forward to your support.
Thank you very much. As I close, I want to reiterate this budget was developed in accordance with the board adopted budget assumptions in alignment with our mission, board goals, and our strategic plan, and to meet the new needs of our continuously ever-growing population to improve our educational program with the necessary resources to support it. The Board of Education believes this budget fulfills the mission of our district, supporting high aspirations for students and developing them into responsible citizens and prepared to contribute and succeed in a complex society. Our team is proud to work in this community, and on behalf of the board, I thank you for your time, and we stand prepared to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gerard. This time, if we're okay with members of the RTM, I'd like to go through the education budget, the budget they presented to us.
I know.
If we use the executive summary sheet, the first section in the executive summary sheet in instructional salaries starts on page 7 and goes up to page 17. Will members of the RTM have any questions to the Board of Education on instructional salaries? If there's no questions on instructional salaries, which starts on page 7, we'll go on to support salaries, which starts on page 18 and goes to page 25. Any questions from the RTM on support salary? Page 18. No question on support salaries to go on to employee benefits, which starts on page 26 and continues on to page 32.
Mr. Moderator, I believe Sue Driscoll has a
Yep.
question.
Sue Driscoll, you have the floor.
Just trying to help out here, Sue.
I'm trying to follow my cross references from 12 different documents you sent us and clicked too late. I just had a quick question on the support services.
Sure.
In general, the support salaries. The budget increase, it says a 4.89% increase over prior year. And to the best of my recollection, various union contract agreements and everything did not have an increase that high in that year. So these are for hiring additional people. Is that what the increase is from?
Yes, correct. I would call your attention to page 17, Sue.
Okay.
You can see on the left-hand column the addition of 8 paraprofessionals that we had to hire during the course of this school year to meet the needs of special education students. Those are dictated through the special education process called the PPT process. And those are need to be reflected in next year's budget. So the differentiator between contractual salary increases and the total increase is really mainly the addition of those 8 paraprofessionals.
Follow up, somewhat related, because you had mentioned that we're now recruiting and charging towns that are just have K-8 schools, and you're charging $12,230 per student for them. Do we? Is it even legal? But do we know if the kids that we are accepting from them, if they have special needs accommodations that will shoot up our budget? Because I know that's a big, somewhat uncontrollable part of your budget.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ms. Driscoll. Any special education costs would be borne by the sending town. So if we receive a special education student from one of our 3 partner districts, 100% of the special ed costs are on the sending district. No cost to Waterford for that.
Okay, and then last follow up there. We're charging $12,230 per student, and I know it's in this pile somewhere, and I can't find it right now. What is our per pupil cost right now?
I think slightly over 18,000.
Over 18,000. So was there like a market driven decision to ask for less than it would cost us to educate that child?
One of the things that, and I'll give you a brief answer, and if Joe Mancini has anything to add, he certainly can. There's no additional cost to turn on the lights. We're not buying any additional materials. There's no increase in anybody's salary because of these sending districts. We're not providing them any transportation at this point, and they're not using any of our buses. So arriving at that is backing out some of those factors. The other factor absolutely was a market study of what other providers, other high schools are charging these sending towns, and making sure that we were coming up with a market competitive rate. Absolutely. And then the third factor, it kind of goes back to the first point. I always like to use the analogy talking about this, and I think I use this with our own Board of Ed. It's kind of like seats on the airplane, that sometimes you can get a good deal on an airline ticket at the very last second because the plane's flying whether or not you're on it. Mm-hmm. And a way to for airlines to grab revenue is to sell those seats at a discount, because the cost to fly that plane is is the same whether or not those last few seats are filled or not. So why not grab the revenue? And using that analogy for the high school as well.
Okay, and that's good to hear. That's reassuring because I know elsewhere when the discussion was on your new initiative to recruit more students to the high school, there was a reference in another budget item that we had to add a Norwich Lake bus and we have to provide transportation for them. So I was concerned that, we might be incurring additional transportation costs. Want to make sure those were covered.
Yeah, because you brought up transportation related to this item, absolutely. In this budget is the addition of a late bus, not because we have to. It's another added incentive for these sending towns. It's less than the cost of one student tuition from these sending towns. One of the things that we saw with students attending Waterford High from the sending towns this year is some of them who had a strong desire to participate in co-curricular activities or receive after-school academic help couldn't do that because they didn't have the resources on the home front to be picked up at 5 o'clock at night or later. So that is the reason for the addition of a late bus in this budget is to continue to entice sending towns to send their students here and accommodate those needs of those students. So it's not a requirement, but the board made that choice.
Okay, well, I didn't mean to inadvertently skip into a detailed discussion on an upcoming line item, so I'll reserve any questions till later.
Any members of the RTM have any additional questions on both salaries? And that, how about employee benefits? Nothing on employee benefits. We're going to contractual services. It starts on page 30 and goes to page 32. Nothing on contract services. Transportation starts on 36 and goes on to 37. Transportation. Question? If nothing on transportation, we'll go on to insurance on page 40. Question on insurance. Nothing on insurance, we'll go on to communications, 40 to 43. Questions on communication. Next item on their budget is tuition. Starts on page 44, goes to 53. Questions on tuition. If nothing on tuition, other purchased services. Starts on page.
I believe Ms. Driscoll has a question on.
Susan Driscoll got the floor.
For the tuition, how many students do we have from Waterford who are going out to magnet school? I know that's been an ongoing problem because then we incur all sorts of costs for that.
Yeah, thankfully, with some targeted marketing and educating families, we've reduced that by about 25% over the last 4 or 5 years. With that said, if you look on pages 51 and 52 of your budget books, it outlines by location. You can see on page 51 at the top, Friendship School. We only pay for kindergarten students attending there or pre-K if they're special ed. Currently, we don't have any special ed students there that are in pre-K. But you can see 15. I'm just trying to see if there's a total number And then you can see New London magnets on lower left on page 51. And on page 52, you can see those as well. I could do a quick add. I don't see a total amongst all those schools. Perhaps Mr. Powers, who's online, can work on that while we're moving on to other questions and circle back on that.
Yeah, on the bottom of page 52, the total projected enrollment is 505,846. It's an actual increase of 39,000 due to projected tuition increases for the towns.
I think I was looking for a head count, but that's okay.
We can work on that, Ms. Driscoll, while we're
there's 280 total on the sheet. If excluding the pre-K at the Friendship School, you're at 175.
But that might include tech schools, Joe, and VOAG.
Oh, absolutely includes Grasso Tech, Norwich.
Yeah.
This is every single thing that's on there.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe.
Anybody else have any questions on the tuition or other purchase services? No, we're going to instructional supplies. Starts on page 58 and goes to page 63. Instructional supplies.
Did we skip one?
Danielle's.
Yeah, I have a question on the instructional supplies. Summer education and summer school is included in that. Do we have any idea what that looks like this year? Is there a cost savings in there somewhere for summer school?
Sure. So we have not received any firm guidance from the Connecticut State Department of Education on summer school. Certainly for students who have summer programming as part of their IEP, special ed students, for example, we're going to be required to provide that either virtually or in person. We're supposed to, in the coming weeks, receive further guidance from the commissioner on summer school, but we're going to be required to provide some summer programming specifically. What we're able to do with public health conditions, I guess time will tell. No projection on that yet.
Danielle, any additional questions? Mrs. Driscoll, you have an additional question?
No, I didn't have a question on this one. I thought I missed a section, that's all.
No additional questions. Instructional supplies will go on to operation and maintenance of buildings. Starts on page 64, goes to page 74. Questions, members of the RTM? No questions on operation and maintenance of building. We'll go on to textbooks, library books, and other supplies. Starts on page 75, goes to 83. No questions on textbooks, library books, or other supplies. We'll go on to equipment. That's on page 84, goes to page 87.
Oh, God.
Danielle, you got a question? Sue, you got a question?
Did you say Danielle or Sue?
Tom, I got a question.
Who's that?
Rich Morgan.
Rich
Did
Morgan,
you
you got the
skip
floor,
other-
then we'll go back to Sue Driscoll.
Did you skip other purchased services?
That's what I thought.
Well, if I did, I didn't. Let's take care of equipment, we'll go back to that. Anybody else think anything on equipment? Sue Driscoll, you got your hand up?
I had my hand up, yeah, and you're moving so fast. I'm sorry. Textbooks, library, books, other supplies. I think my quick question was the athletics budget matrices that appear at the end of that. That's all, because I'm not doing the math fast in my head. Is that everything that's in other supplies and materials?
Trying to make sure we're looking at the same thing. Other supplies and materials, bottom of page 77. It's primarily around student activities and athletics. There are some minor supplies for BOE operations, as well as supplies, central office, staples and copy paper and things of that nature. And then the rest of that is around athletics and student activities.
So the matrices that are broken out later on. Okay. Now, some of this, because I think it said transportation or anything, that's some of the areas where you have experienced savings during this special time of remote learning.
Yeah, this spring in FY20, correct.
Thank you.
Let's go back to other purchases service. I believe I might have skipped that one and went too quickly. Mr. Morgan, you got a question on other purchase services?
I do. I have a two-part question. So under other purchase services, object 590, contracted services, 100% increase. What is that?
Yeah, so that is the new payment we're making to the town for the use of town hall. Previously, Board of Ed had paid for a custodian to clean town hall as part of the board's contribution to the town. That custodian retired, and when that custodian retired, First Selectman Stewart asked that they take on that responsibility. And in lieu of supplying the custodian, we now make a direct payment to the town in the amount of $72,963. So it's a 100% increase, and you'll see that offset in the part of that offset in another part of the budget under staff. So that's the board's contribution to the town for the use of town hall.
Okay, and that's separate then under account groups, other purchase services?
If you could just, Rich, tell me what page you're on and what line. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same
That's
thing.
under your executive summary. You have tuition and then other purchased services.
And
so that's.
I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing in the executive summary. If I reference other purchase services, I'm sure it refers to that.
Okay.
I would have to find that.
Okay, what's that?
Mr. Morgan, you okay with your answers?
I'm all set, Tom.
Any additional questions on that subject? Other purchase services? Or instructional supplies, or operation of buildings and maintenance? Or textbooks? If no, we'll go on to equipment, which is page 84 to 87. Any questions on equipment? No questions on equipment. We'll go on to dues and fees, page 88. Questions on dues and fees, page 88. The members of the RTM, any questions on the Board of Education budget before we get to the bottom line? Any questions on the Board of Education budget?
Yeah, excuse me, Tom, or through you, Mr. Moderator.
I got Richard Morgan, Sue Driscoll, and Paul Goldstein. So Rich, why don't you go first?
I don't have a question, Tom.
Okay, Paul Goldstein, got the floor.
Hi, Tom. In one of the workshops, I overheard, I think it was in one of the final workshops, that $50,000 was added to the legal line item. Can you explain if that did occur, why that was?
No, that was one of the possibilities discussed, but the board did not act on adding that into the budget. So there was no addition under legal fees, other than what was proposed beginning of February.
Thank you.
And I believe Susan Driscoll's got the floor next.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I was, slow in hitting the button for dues and fees. I had questions about the cost for the vans. On page 90, we have dues and fees for Waterford High School, which I just wanted to ask what those were for, and the same question about the fees for vans there.
Sure, I'll take, this is Tom Giard. I'll take the high school fees and Joe can take the van fees. High school fees, you can see, has jumped up, let me see, not jumped, not in this particular line. This is mainly fees that we pay to CIAC, which is the governing body for athletics in the state of Connecticut. So if we want our youngsters to participate in CIAC sanctioned activities, we pay that. And then the other chunk of that 13,000 are the fees and dues that we pay to NEASC, which is the New England accreditation body for high schools and colleges. So that makes up 70% of that category. The other 30% of high school fees are, maybe the band membership, the Thespian Society, National Honor Society, things of that nature. But 70% of that 13,000 is CIAC in the accrediting institution.
Okay.
And then Joe, can you talk about a little bit about any fees we pay for vans?
Yeah, so that's actually the ADA nationwide roadside assistance. So based on experience, our costs for next year went up. Evidently, they don't like towing home vans from Orange, Connecticut very often.
Really? Can't imagine why. Okay, thank you. I was going back from the 173% increase in the summary line and going back to look at the actual numbers, so to make sure that it was not as startling as it was. It was a $500 increase, so all right.
Mr. Driscoll, you all set?
Yep, thank you.
Rich Muckle, I believe you had your hand up. And floor recognizes Rich Muckle.
Object number 620 in operation and maintenance in buildings, page 65. Not a lot of dollars, but it's a over 900% increase.
Which line, Mr. Muckle in particular?
620.
Yeah, he's talking about fuel. He's talking about fuel oil.
Yes.
So ironically, that's unfortunately. So we're not using fuel oil in any of the buildings anymore, with the exception of the generators. Having said that, if you look on page 69, you'll see that the increase is actually due to the reduction in the contribution for community use of schools from the town to the board. So it's just a misnomer. It's not a real increase. It's just how it's presented. I agree, it looks horrible, but as we slowly unwind this community use of schools, this is what it looks like as it flows through our financials.
That's reflected on the middle of page 69, Mr. Muckle.
I see it, Tom. Thank you.
Yep.
All set, Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muckle. Any other questions from members of the RTM? Any other questions from members of the RTM? If not, the Board of Education budget for the coming year requested is $50,842,315. What's your pleasure? Susan Driscoll, you got your hand up? Susan Driscoll?
Sue, you're muted.
You're muted. Dave, you're supposed to stop doing that. Yeah, smile. It sounded like you were jumping right to the end, and I wanted to at least make a comment, which I'm sorry is not more profound or written out, not that prepared. But in looking at this budget and, you know, starting our deliberations tonight and for the rest of the week, first I just wanted to acknowledge the efforts of our first selectman, who in the middle of his honeymoon period with the town, had a pandemic drop on him. And he took advantage, if that's the right term, of the situation and the delays called in holding the Board of Finance budget hearings to take a hard look at the financial ramifications, among other things, of the pandemic, the lockdown, people losing their jobs. And he went to the Board of Finance and he spoke to them. He took a new pass at the budgets he had already approved and asked for additional cuts to bring this down to, you know, if possible, a flat budget, in recognition of the serious financial challenges presented to so many of the people in town. So I just wanted to acknowledge, Rob knows I don't agree with all of his cuts that he made, but I appreciate the effort and I acknowledge the recognition of the struggles that we expect many of our taxpayers to be experiencing over the next few months. There's nothing but dire predictions. There's talk of depression-era unemployment as soon as June. You know, there's predictions of a second round of the virus, and then we'd have to, just after we get released and back into a semi-normal routine, we're going to have to jerk back. So it is a more unknown future than we usually face when we're looking at a budget, because everyone tries to predict on past experiences and what they are confident will be happening. With that being said, I would hope that my colleagues, you know, as they go through their, you know, deliberations, and I know that there have been many people really paying close attention, agonizing, asking difficult questions, asking for extra information, which was why we were all surrounded by multiple documents from the Board of Ed that we were trying to cross-reference, to make sure they have a good handle on what we really, really need and what we can do to help out our taxpayers. The other departments that will be following, they have all stepped up to the challenge, and I would like to have everyone keep an open mind. I do appreciate the efforts at cost efficiencies and savings and trying to pull in new revenue generators that Superintendent Giard and the Board of Ed have enacted over the past couple of years, like recruiting the new students and everything. And, you know, I love the sound of $1 million, but today it's a much lower number than that. And we are looking for, it would be good if we could provide some immediate relief. You know, consider, is there any place where we think that we could, with some creative thinking, maybe reduce this with the recognition that we can't rely on the amount of state aid that we're predicting, that we can't be sure that the grants that we've always gotten in the past are going to make it. These, you know, nonprofits and such are dropping like flies through this pandemic. So we want to be the safest we can be, knowing that there are struggles ahead. And I think I have seen the Board of Education rise to the challenge in the past when they stepped up when the town was in dire financial straits, and they came up with some great creative new ways of thinking, and that's good because I think it's benefited us in the past 5 years, and we've seen excellent raises in the scores in math, so that's good. But I'd just like everyone to keep an open mind and consider that we think we have a great education system. No one here, I can say with confidence, wants to, you know, to diminish that intentionally. That is certainly not. It provides a great value to the town, not just to the kids, but to the property values for economic development. But we also need to look carefully and make sure that we are not consciously putting an additional needless burden on our taxpayers by not looking for every place where maybe we could conserve money and come up with some new plans going forward. So that's basically it. I wish it was clearer, but I ran out of time.
Floor recognizes Danielle Stewart-Delinas.
So I thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Superintendent GR, for an excellent presentation and for all of the efforts that you and your board have made. In light of this pandemic, I'd really like to voice some concerns about this budget. First, let me say I am not advocating for layoffs in this historic time. I'd like to look for increased efficiencies that will help our entire town without hurting our great educational system, teachers, support staff, and students. Over the past 7 years, and we've seen this in the presentation, the Board of Ed has presented an average 1.5% increase per year. This year, there is a request for a 3.05% increase. I fully understand that there are contractual obligations that we cannot change, but these increases right now are unsustainable, especially in this environment. We need to change the current culture of spending in this area and find a way to provide these wonderful services more efficiently to our town. Based on these reasons, I move to reduce the proposed Board of Ed budget by $470,000, which would decrease the 3.05% increase to a 2.1% increase.
Second.
Motion made by Danielle Delinas Stewart and seconded by Susan Driscoll. Discussion.
Hand was up, Mr. Moderator.
Excuse me, Ms. Wagner, your floor is yours.
First of all, I'm very concerned that we're moving to cut at this point, especially that substantial amount of money. This budget has been vetted by building administrators, central office administrators, the Board of Ed who made cuts. And right now, with this increase for the Board of Ed, we will not be seeing any increase in most probably in for tax bills. The scores that you saw tonight presented, those don't move by themselves. That takes full force work by a lot of dedicated teachers and students and families. And I think at this point, as we're finally heading in the right direction and we're moving up that chart so that we can be proud of our schools, and our schools are something we invest in, they increase our property rights and our property values. I think this is really unfortunate that we're even considering a cut at this point. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other comments from members of the RTM? Any other members of the RTM have any comments? Susan Driscoll, got the floor.
I have the floor because I've been hearing a lot of comments all week, and I'm surprised that it's so quiet right now, from both sides of the discussion. I truly appreciate what my colleague, Ms. Fury Wagner, just said, and want to reiterate that everyone recognizes the excellence of our schools, but we also recognize that these are difficult times facing all of us, facing the town, facing everyone. We need, the cut is reasonable to you and me and to any other person on this screen. $470,000 is a lot of money, but you have to put it into perspective. It is 0.5% of this entire budget. It incorporates, realization of savings we've had. We have to recognize, right now, with the budget cuts in all the other departments who went flat, who also were struggling to meet contracted salary increases, but still went in and made the effort to find efficiencies in order to have a flat budget to provide some modicum of relief to our taxpayers.
Lost the audio.
What happened? In this difficult year. This is an emergency situation. We are trying to adapt for this year. The cut would give us a buffer, because the concept of the flat rate on the increase, because we've already had these cuts, holds true only so long if the projected revenues come through. If they don't, then that's going to mean the flat budgets aren't going to hold the milled rate steady. There needs to be, if nothing else, a safety net, for lack of a better term. The projections that we have for some lost revenues and stuff, a cut of this size, which I'm confident that the Board of Ed could find ways to deal with this without, as Daniel said, attacking salary, decimating this. It would be a 1 year, temporary. Let's step up and help everyone and recognize that all the taxpayers in this town have to be contributing to this budget. It's not going to be an oppressive cut, I do not think. And it guarantees that we would not be, that we would have a flat mill rate change this year, because there are so many variables bouncing around right now.
All right, guys, and Ashley, if you guys before next, floor is yours.
I just would like to understand why we're reaching for a number of $470,000. Is that is there some backing behind that particular number?
In looking at, I'm going to respond if that's okay, Mr. Moderator. In looking through the budgets and looking at the numbers, there was talk in all of the Board of Ed meetings about taking this down 1%. So what I did was really look at their budget and what 1% would be, and that is where that 470 is coming from.
Okay, through you, Marauder, I'd like to have a question for Superintendent Gerard.
Please, go right ahead, sir.
What's going on here?
How would these proposed $470,000 cuts affect your department?
Yeah, just as a point of clarification, this would be substantially more than 1%, because the Board of Ed cut 163 on February 27th. So this would be significantly over the 1%, just as a point of clarification. As far as the impact of the cuts, by statute, that responsibility falls to the Board of Education. It will be the Board of Education who makes the cuts. If the board were to get a cut from the RTM, certainly I'm there to support them and provide recommendations. When you look at the 18th slide that I gave you around the context of the budget, where I broke down the 6 major categories of the budget, and I'm going to attempt to do that again. Bear with me. I don't know if you can see the slide I put up. When you look at the 4 major categories of salaries and compensation, employee benefits, which is primarily health insurance, heat, energy, fuel, and transportation, which are primarily fixed costs, everything else in our budget is flat. So, you're talking about loss of service. Everything else in the budget has already been mitigated. That's, quote, discretionary, let's say, when you're at a flat budget outside of those 4 major categories, which are primarily fixed costs. So as far as the impact, that'll be determined by the Board of Education. Even the board's cuts on February 27th of $163,000 were cuts to staffing and service. They cut a proposed high school school to career coordinator, and they cut magnet busing. I mean, it's loss of staffing and service. So I would imagine, I mean, those are the big ticket items in any budget. So.
So then we could just make an assumption that the affected lines would be staffing and potentially services then.
That responsibility ultimately falls to the Board of Education, but a cut of this magnitude of about 1.5%, combining the board cut with this cut, yeah, I would imagine staffing would be an area that the board would look at.
I appreciate your diplomacy in the matter. Thank you.
Ed Wells Collins, I think you asked for the floor. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As someone who has the good fortune of being a high school teacher, not in this district, but in the Lebanon school district, I wanted to just kind of share some of my thoughts about what a cut at this time might mean for teachers and for students and families. I'm very well aware, and I think we should all be very appreciative of the extreme efforts that our Board of Selectmen, our First Selectmen, Board of Finance, the Board of Education have all gone through to reach the cuts that we've seen so far and to reduce the budget as much as possible. But for those of us who are actually in classrooms and actually delivering services to students, the truth is we really don't know what the future holds. We don't know what's going to be required of us next fall. We don't even know what's going to be required of us for the rest of the school year. And it seems to me that at this point, with so much uncertainty, it might not be well advised to make such a significant cut to the Board of Education budget, especially when we're not able by law to be definite about which line items we want to eliminate. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Nick Colothier, I think you asked for the floor.
Yeah, I had a question for those who proposed this cut. Obviously, by statute, we can't choose specific line items, but when you propose a cut of that amount, I mean, what line item would you recommend specifically that money would come out of? Or, you know, what were you thinking in proposing that amount? What line items were you looking at to cut from, just in your own personal opinion?
So when you look through the budget and when you look through what the Board of Ed was proposing as their cuts, and they did speak to the line item of coaches, and I am not, again, I'm going to emphasize that I am not looking for anyone to be laid off in this situation. But there was talk in one of the Board of Ed meetings about efficiency and about overlap of services. And my example would be the coaching positions. So if there is a teacher that needs to leave their classroom for a PPT, a substitute is hired to cover that classroom. Would it be more efficient to take your coach and use the coach as that substitute if you could plan for that change? That is one small example, but I think there are efficiencies in the use of staff that may make this budget different.
Steve Elsey, I believe you asked for the floor next.
All right. Hello, can you guys hear me? Because my mic has been a little weird. Is all good? Yeah. Okay. I was just commenting on a couple of people back there who were saying about the uncertainty of the whole situation that we're in right now. I mean, Tom, this goes to you. Next year, do we know if we have to redesign inside of schools to prepare for social separation of kids? Do you know if we need any new software that's going to be required for teachers to learn, for distance learning and in-person learning? Do we know if we're going to have to buy tests and equipment needed to test kids all the time, and what kind of money that costs? Do we know anything about the uncertainty? Do we know if you have to have staggered programming schedules and how that busing works? How about classroom kids? 28 students per classroom. Now you got to break that in half. More time in the classroom. How does it work? All these add up to costs. Do we know those costs right now?
It's a great question, and I made reference to that in my opening remarks, Mr. Elsie. The short answer is we don't know what the playing field will be in the fall.
And really quick, and because you don't know, my question to you is, would this be the appropriate time to make cuts when such uncertainty is around us right now? And thank you again.
Sure. We don't know what the additional costs will necessarily be in the fall. If we maintain a distance learning environment or continue a distance learning environment where we start in school, but then we're out November to February, depending on different projections. Will there be technology costs? Maybe. We set up, Mr. Minor, our director of facilities, set up different classrooms over at Great Neck last week for me to look at, with all desks 6 feet apart in a classroom. That gets about 12 kids into a room, which means we're probably running either split sessions, A through L in the morning, M through Z in the afternoon. Certainly, if we ran that model, there would be transportation costs. Could we see an increase in counseling? Some of our students in this community have experienced loss or trauma or social isolation. On top of that, there could be a body of students who were programmed for special services this spring who could say, I'm not getting the services. And I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but going into tonight, I could foresee a scenario where I'm coming back asking you for more money next year, as opposed to, never mind a cut tonight. Depending on how things shake out, I could be asking for more money from you next fall.
So my follow-up to that really quick is, so with the $100,000 that was already cut, and you said that already equated to personnel and jobs. So now we're talking, almost $500,000. Of course, that's going to be personnel and jobs on top of uncertainty in our time that we live on. Is that what I understand?
It certainly could be. Again, those decisions, will be ultimately made by the Board of Education. It will come down to decisions. Is it people, or do we want to change our air filters every 6 months instead of every 3 months? Those are the type of decisions when you get a cut of $500,000 that a Board of Education's going to wrestle with.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
I believe Susan Driscoll asked the floor next, then Sally Reggie.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I guess I'll try to work backwards. The personnel and jobs that were cut, Tom, that you mentioned, at the previous stage, those were not cut in this budget. They were cut before we got this number to work with. When you say personnel and jobs cut in reference to that, do you mean that we actually laid someone off, or was that a cut for a proposal to add personnel?
Sure, I'm going to just share a slide that I shared. You should see a slide up on your screen, hopefully.
Yep.
The February 27th Board of Ed cut, that was a cut the Board of Ed made to the proposed budget by me. They cut all remaining out-of-town magnet transportation. They had already cut high school magnet transportation last budget cycle. So they cut elementary and middle school magnet busing, cut a school to career coordinator position. Nobody lost the job. That was a proposed position. They cut laptop replacements, which were for Quaker Hill teachers and science students at Waterford High. Working with the first selectman, we're going to keep the buses over at the high school. So that was a cost backed out. And then we saw some favorability in LAP insurance, which is liability auto property insurance. So loss of service, and certainly in busing, some equipment, and no person lost a job, but a position cut.
Okay, thank you. To clarify that, because when the rumor mill starts, it already started last week. I just wanted to make it clear, because it sounded like you actually, fired someone already just to get to this number. And I wanted to reassure people that we were not encouraging that kind of reaction. As far as the percentage increase and everything, yes, I appreciate that you made some cuts to get it down to a 3.1% increase that you were asking us for, which is well above your average, as you explained to us, of 1.75. This proposed cut would bring it down, the final number, to a 2.1% increase. That is still above the 1.75 average that the Board of Ed has been working with. And it matches the highest, basically, permitted increase in budget in the other town departments, in the big ticket ones, which are the closest, nothing compares to the size of the overall budget of the Board of Ed, an individual department, but the largest ones, it is a 2.1. They have all held the line at 2.1% or under. So I don't want to use, basically, elementary school playground talk and say it's only fair, but it is. It's a reasonable amount. It's easier for us to say on the other side. I have seen you and the Board of Ed rise to a challenge. I understand that no one knows what's really out there, and you might encounter new expenses, but the same holds true for all the other departments and all of our taxpayers. So we are trying to find a balance where we at least make the effort to temper the overall impact. Thank you.
Sally Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Also, thank you to the Board of Ed. It was a comprehensive budget. I appreciate that Mr. Giard, that you went through the requests from the principals and building and maintenance, and you made cuts, which is what our first selectman did or recommended. And I wish, like we all do, I think, that we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, that we could have everything that we would like to provide to our students and to our residents. But there's a time when you just can't have everything. And while Steve Elsey brings up some good points about possible costs due to the pandemic, if we continue with in-classroom learning, we also then have to look at, if there isn't in-classroom learning, then when we talk about playing fields, are any students going to be on playing fields? Are any students going to be taking the bus to another neighboring town to play football or basketball or baseball? We all have to agree we just don't know. And so I am going to support some kind of cut here. I will say that having worked for the town, the idea of substitute personnel is something that never occurs in any town department. If there's a secretary out, we answer the phone and we do everything that secretary does in addition to our own job. If there was a custodian out, we picked up the trash, and at times I even cleaned bathrooms. I think I think we get used to what we have, and sometimes we have to take things away. And yes, one day at work might be a little harder because the secretary's out, but it's not the end of the world. And so that's the way town government has operated for the 16, 17 years that I were there. And I think that's something that the Board of Ed could give a try to see if it could work. We get comfortable just saying, we have substitutes, put them in. Maybe you don't need to. That's just, again, a little example. But thanks for listening.
Dave Elsey, I think you want the floor.
Yeah, just once again, I'm as I'm sitting here, people are watching, and teachers are texting me nonstop, literally losing their mind over this because they work 15-hour days. And I'm just, on behalf of them, I'm just going to put that out there right now, that this will affect people, programs, and in the midst of a pandemic, right now, where the situation of what we're going to need in the fall is so imperative. Now's the time to hold steady. Right now, hold steady, because we don't know what's coming. We do not know. We don't. And as I literally, I'm getting a flood of people telling me to speak up and to keep doing what I'm doing. And that's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you right now, everybody, there's, you all have great points, but there's a time and a place for these great points. This probably isn't one of them. In the midst of a pandemic, we don't know the future. We don't know what's going on. As this was said before, this budget was vetted many times, and the cuts already happened. Yes, Sue, you're right. Nobody lost their job right now, but jobs weren't hired. And with $500,000 and the potential of more money being used on education and next year's development, jobs, programming, and personnel will come out. If you're not going to say it right now, then you're fooling yourself. That's what's going to happen. Just say it. You want to cut, that's fine, but you need to just say it. Thank you.
I guess and ask you, I think you asked before next.
Yeah, just to kind of echo what Steve said, you know, I think there's an opportunity here if there is a surplus for it to be returned to the general fund. You know, should the case be that there's more distance learning in the fall, people aren't bringing their children to school. You know, I think it might be better to have that money there as a contingency, and you know, worst case scenario, it becomes a surplus. I think we should encourage cost saving measures throughout every department, regardless of whether we put a $470,000 budget cut into it. I think that needs to be made in practice, but you know, maybe look for ways to create revenue. And maybe this question's for Mr. Gerard. Have you ever considered doing like a cost plus daycare at the elementary schools? That might provide a benefit to the parents of the town, but also a way to put some revenue into the Board of Education.
Yeah, I mean, that's not something, you know, discussed to date. You know, certainly, obviously, space is, you know, you want to look at, but also the liability involved. Are we going to subcontract it out, employees, things of that nature? I think a far greater revenue. I appreciate the idea. It's not something we've discussed necessarily. You know, a far greater revenue driver is going to be our K-8 sending districts. Once we maximize, we're 20% of the way there to $1 million a year. $1 million a year in revenue to the town general fund equals about almost $50 million in grand list growth. So, you know, I think, you know, from the revenue side, I think the K-8, but I certainly take your, we're taking notes, and I appreciate your idea and something we can certainly look into. Yeah,
I think a lot of the overhead's already built in. Again, insurance, look at your costs, and maybe you can actually put something in to help you out.
Danielle Gelinas, I think you asked before next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Steve, Elsie, I hear your concerns, and I hear that you're getting this from teachers, and I understand our teachers and respect them. I have family that have taught in this town and are still teaching in this town. Again, my goal is not to have layoffs with this level of a cut. As you speak to the pandemic and the changing needs that will come in the fall, we've had changes now. We've recouped fuel costs for bus transportation. What are we saving for spring sports? All of that money is then returned to our general fund. We are not looking to cut from last year's budget. We are looking to decrease the increase that is being asked for right now. That being said, we don't know what the fall looks like. We do know that eventually the board can come back and request money from that general fund, whatever has been recouped on this side, if I'm correct. If I'm not, someone please correct me on that. But again, the request for this decrease is not for layoffs or program loss. I think there are inefficiencies that can be remedied to create this change.
Ellie Ritchie, I think you asked before next.
Okay, just one final comment. You know, as an RTM member, we are representing the town as a whole, and that's 19,000 or more people. And while teachers have a vested interest, obviously, in a job that they love and that is critical to them, are calling Steve and texting him, I would imagine, having been through numerous RTM members, that there are probably very few members of the public that are watching this right now. And I'm trying to stay cognizant of their needs, not particularly their needs. And they've asked that we try to keep the taxes low. So I'm just reiterating that.
Steve Melcy, I think you asked for the floor next again.
So I understand that I don't believe the taxes are affected at all. A, that's what I think. That's what I think is happening. And B, I know it's not the goal. Everybody keeps saying it's not the goal to affect personnel or programmings, but that's what's going to happen. That's the effect. I mean, I know it's not the goal, and that's the polite way to say it, and I love it, but it's not. It's just not. That's just not how it operates. It will affect all that stuff, and I get that you don't want it to, and that's great, but it will affect this sort of programming. It will affect staff, personnel, incoming jobs. Who knows? Paras, all of it become affected by this, whether you want it or not. It will to some degree, maybe to a large degree, if in fact the pandemic rolls in and we have more of an incoming cost. Now we've just cut. Tom said a couple of $100,000 before, and now 500,000, and now we have incurred costs of things we do not know what's coming up. So now that's definitely going to affect personnel, programs, and whatnot. I'm just saying it's not. I know we don't want to, but that will be the effect.
Vin Wagner, you got the floor next.
This will be a very tough decision for all of us. And before we do it, I'd like to go back to that. Like, just let's make sure we have the right information. To make a $470,000 cut, it's not going to be through cheerleading uniforms. It's not going to be through substitutes. It's not going to be through a couple of extra bus routes. That kind of money, I did this for 32 years, and I made budgets from the building level, and I've gone through cuts where I had to lay off 11 teachers, and a $470,000 cut is going to mean some teachers go home. And then it's not a one-for-one, because you still are responsible for their unemployment. So for every teacher you lay off, you still hold a bit of them. So it's a lot more teachers than you would think. You might think, oh, maybe 2 or 3, but it will be more than that. I'm not a member of the board. I don't, thank God, have to make a decision about where the cuts, if they come, will come from. But I want everybody to realize that you can't nickel and dime away a $470,000 cut in a school budget where it's all about people. Thank you.
Ed Walsh Collins, you have the floor next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think that both sides have made some excellent points. And in truth, over the last week, when I was listening to the arguments and looking at the budget myself, I was very tempted to vote in favor of cuts to this budget, or let me rephrase that and be more accurate, in favor of reducing the budget increase. But the fact is, aside from this idea about, substitute teachers going out, the gym teacher running up from the gym to cover somebody's class, which let me tell you is not going to happen, I have not heard anyone lay out specifically where they're expecting this money to come from. And if I don't hear someone lay out very specifically where they're expecting this money to come out of the budget, then I'm left to conclude that this is an arbitrary amount based on whatever a neat number is, and I'm not going to vote for a cut that's just an arbitrary amount. If there is no concrete plan laid out from which to take this money out of the budget, then I don't think I can vote in favor of it. And I encourage the people who are proposing this to really lay out. Let's look at it and explain to us where you suggest this money comes out of the budget very specifically and explicitly. But unless that happens, I can't vote in favor of reducing the budget. Thank you.
Can I just make a point of clarification? Baird, I am not suggesting that the PE teacher go up and take on the role of the math teacher. I am suggesting that the math coach, which is a position in the school, goes in to take over that math class while the math teacher attends a meeting. So it's a workflow change. I'm not asking for a coach, meaning a sport coach. I am meaning one of the academic coaches to move. We cannot recommend line item changes. I can just tell you there are things that can move around when you look at the budget. I'm sure that I can have someone else chime in on that one for me.
I could chime in right now by just saying some of the coaches work 15-hour days, as I'm being texted all over. People are watching this right now. 15-hour days. So when you say you're just going to move them around, it doesn't work that way.
Point of order, this speaker wasn't recognized, and I know a lot of people are waiting.
Hey, Jim Charlie asked for the call next. Jen?
Audio. Can't hear you.
I just wanted to reiterate what Danielle said, that it's unfair to ask us what line items to cut when we do not have the authority to cut specific line items in the Board of Ed budget. I was told that during the Board of Ed hearings, there were ways to cut more money without laying people off. And that was my question, because I don't want to vote for something where people get laid off. I believe there's more efficient ways to look at things. And I also know that there should be money coming back with the schools being closed. And you, correct me if I'm wrong, the Board of Ed can go back should they need more money if the COVID crisis is still a concern back in September. If they need supplies to change their classrooms, they can go back and ask for money from the general fund. So that's my understanding. Thank you.
Dave Lurch, you got the floor next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. In my world, the glass is half full. In my world, you have between 19 and 20, a little more than a $1 million increase in the budget. With the proposed reduction, you still have a little more than $1 million increase in the budget. Question I have is we have a 3.5% increase, or $1.5 billion increase in the budget, and how long do we sustain that for how many years? And $1 million seems to me like a lot of money, and I appreciate the fact that we're hearing from teachers, and I can empathize with them when they want more to be able to do their job better. But I also hear from a lot of taxpayers who are telling me, look, we don't want to see any increases in any spending, but we are looking at the possibility of increasing the spending from last year over $1 million. And to me, I think that's generous. Thank you.
Susan Driscoll, you asked for the floor?
No. Sorry.
Okay, then Tim Condon's having trouble.
Tim Condon, you want the floor?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Tim. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I just, I'm listening to everybody going back and forth with really good debate. And the only thing that I would like to add is everything is a question mark right now. Everything. Economic development. There is no businesses in our town Non-essential businesses are closed. We have no idea what our business landscape is going to look like when we start to reopen. None of our restaurants are open. Our gyms are closed. The Crystal Mall anchor stores, some of those stores are on the brink of bankruptcy. That's our second or third largest taxpayer. We don't have an economic picture. And when we set the budget on the assumption of a collection rate. And that's going to be extremely difficult to do this year because we don't know what that picture is going to look like. And I'm not advocating for the exact number. I think there has to be a cut across the board. And I just want to reiterate that it's a cut to the increase. And I would like to add that I don't want to see any teachers get cut. I don't think anybody wants to see a teacher get cut. And I would advocate that if this board can't find the money, then, come back to this board. You can always ask for more money, but the question mark is not something specific to the Board of Ed. Our entire way we formulate budgets is highly in question. That makes this whole thing very precarious. And I just want to remind people that we make our budgets on assumptions that we have businesses to tax. We don't know what our business landscape is going to look like. So we have to be extremely careful. Thank you.
So I believe you asked for the floor. The floor is yours.
The mute button. Let me just offer my 2 cents on this. All of our board departments have submitted a budget based on everything this coming year being normal, a normal year. And we know it's not going to be a normal year. I think I've heard from Mr. Gerard that we'll probably not be opening the schools in the fall. Did I understand that correctly, Tom?
I did not say that. What I said is that there's certainly one possibility, depending on public health conditions.
Okay. So going back, let's go on an assumption that there's not going to be any school this fall. In that case, we don't need heat above 55. We don't need air-conditioned schools. We don't need lighting. We don't need really custodial care workers. And I'm only comparing this to the Waterford Country School. I happen to serve as the vice president of the board. We have 70 teachers at the Waterford Country School. And what we have for a budget every year is what the state gives us. If they're telling us they're going to give us $200 a day per student, we've got to make it work. And for years, they never gave us an increase. And we had to find ways of saving the 70 teachers, the same time cut other programs. So, I'm working 2 sides of the coin. I'm working with the town who's saying, hey, we got all this money, let's do it. On the other hand, I represent a school system in the board with 70 teachers that are given so much money per student per day, and that's it. So I'm not sure what I'm saying, but the fact is, we only have a pot that's so big. And I haven't heard what's going to happen if schools do close in the fall time. When are we going to start planning for that? What are we going to do with our teachers come end of August? I mean, are they just going to, do we have a program set up where all teachers will have an online program giving instructions? So I don't know when that plan is going to be in motion, but it's May already, and I think we got to start planning our technology for come end of August, September. What are we going to do to teach our children? Thank you.
Dorothy, I think you asked for the floor next.
Yeah, just kind of going back to a point that's been discussed a little before and a point that Mr. Linso just brought up. So, Ted, when you had a flat fee from the state or flat funding from the state, and you had to make cuts, just so we or I can get a better sense of what this cut might mean, what are the kinds of things that you had to cut when you were at the Waterford Country School? What program, staff, whatever? What was that? What did that look like on your end?
Quite honest with you is that our Waterford Country School is non-union. So if we have no increases in a particular year, unfortunately, the teachers have to stay with the same salary. And that's where the major savings have come from, maintaining the same pay grade year after year until the state increased the daily rate.
So, but that wouldn't work the same because we have unionized teachers in Waterford Public Schools at the high school, Park Lane, and all that.
To answer that question, again, I want to say the benefit of being non-union is the fact that depending on the population of the student body, we can at will lay off a teacher. So we have that as a benefit in our agreement, a non-union agreement with our teaching staff and aides. And like I say, there's 70 of them. And we try our best to do what we can. And a lot of it has to do with maintenance. All schools require a lot of maintenance. And what we do as board members is that we invite in various organizations that will volunteer their staff and their time on a weekend to clean the school, to do painting, to do yard work. So we have a lot of volunteer organizations that support the Waterford Country School. And that's how we are able to save money in the tough times.
I believe Mike McKetty asked for the floor next. Mike?
Get unmuted here. First off, I think it's been a great discussion. I've talked with many of you throughout this. Steve, I do hear what you're saying. I truly want to say that nobody here wants to see people laid off. No one wants to see programs cut. It just concerns me that some people are talking like they know what is going to happen because of this. This is not a cut to their budget. This is a decrease of the increase, and they still are going to be increased by over $1 million. I went to all the budget workshops. They said a guesstimate, or they thought what they would do with a 1% increase. There were no layoffs. Some of you have mentioned it. We do not know what is happening in the fall. We could save even more money in the fall. We might not need this money in the fall. They certainly can come back and ask for some of the money back in the fall. So this is not an end all where we're laying people off and we're cutting people. And when we tell stories of 11 people losing their jobs, it creates fear that I don't think helps the situation. This is a great town with great people that I think will work together through this. So this by no means should be us against them and we're looking to cut teachers and cut programs. That's not what this is about. This is about the other side too, where some of the people, and a couple of comments, I think it was 50-50, where people are also going to be hurting and not being able to pay their taxes, not being at work, not going to their jobs. So it's also a time to conserve money. I'm going to support this decrease of the increase because you can come back and ask for more if needed. And I do think people in these boards and these bodies would be very receptive to that, and so would the taxpayers. So with that, I think it has been a very good discussion, and I would like to move the motion or move the amended motion at this time.
I got a second. Do I have a second on Mike's motion?
I second.
I have my hand up, just so you know.
You didn't care. Who say Steve?
You gotta be quick.
Steve Elsie, make it quick. I'll give you a floor for a couple short motion.
Just to close, Mike, I got you. I know you don't want to cut jobs, but when you take this school systems are people. You're not $500,000 isn't going to be the paper that you get at WB Mason or the paper clips that you buy or anything about it. It's going to be programs. It's going to be people, and it's going to be things that you want. It's not the broom that you buy in the mopping closet. It's not the toilet paper in the bathrooms. It's people and programs. That's what it is. I'm just going to end with that. That's all.
I also had my.
Can I just respond to Steve real quick and then we'll vote on the motion? Steve, I hear you. I do, but it bothers me when you talk like you know. No one here knows what's going to happen.
You're out of order, and it bothers me when you talk to me like that. So cut it out.
All right, we have to move on a procedural motion. Who was the second that moved the motion? Danielle?
Danielle, you second the motion?
Yes.
Okay. I'll take a vote.
We're gonna do a roll.
We're gonna have a roll call vote by the town clerk, and on the motion is just to close the debate.
Is there discussion on this?
Just for everybody's, yeah.
I'm sorry, point of information. What did the moderator say? I thought, are we voting on the motion to move the question, or are we voting on the proposal to reduce the increase?
Town Attorney Rob Avina, this is the motion procedurally to close debate and move this question. It'll require a 2/3 vote to close the debate and move the question.
Thank you.
And
this will be a roll call vote. Mr. Campo.
Mr. Attanasio.
No.
Mr. Bono.
I abstain.
Ms. Brashali.
Yes.
Ms. Cairns.
Yes.
Mr. Condon.
Yes.
Mr. Dembeck.
Yes.
Ms. Driscoll.
Yes.
Mr. Elsey.
No.
Mr. Fioravanti.
No.
Ms. Furry Wagner.
No.
Mr. Gauthier.
No.
Mr. Goldstein.
Yes.
Ms. Cole.
No.
Mr. Lurch.
Yes.
Ms. Mativier.
I abstain as well.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Mr. Muckle.
Yes.
Mr. O'Leary.
Yes.
Mr. Olinsu. Mr. Olinsu, you need to unmute yourself. Mr. Olinsu.
Yes.
Yes. Miss Ritchie.
Yes.
Mr. Rocchetti.
Yes.
Miss Stewart Gelinas.
Yes.
Mr. Swanson.
Yes.
Mr. Welch Collins.
No.
Give me a second to tally it up. But I didn't count the abstentions. 15 of 22. Two-thirds vote, 22 voted. We have 15. I'd rather him here. I'm okay with him hearing me. We have 2/3 to close debate.
Okay, folks, this is Town Attorney Rob Avina. Before there's any substantive votes, I just wanted to state that I have got several requests this week to go over voting procedures within the general budget of the town, both on the Board of Ed side and all town agents. We have a wonderful RTM, and it's made up of many members. We don't have any rules that require that any town employees or any Board of Education employees not serve on the RTM. So over the years, we've had policemen, we've had firemen, and I understand we have also school teachers who work in the Board of Education. I just want to go over again that the way we have done it in the past, and I can go over the ethics standards in the town, is that there's these sub-motions that directly reflect the individual budget that you may or may not be compensated by. The second vote is the general vote at the end of this session on the entire budget of the town, in which many issues are intermingled. The way we have traditionally approached it is more than likely possible that you're facing a bit of a personal conflict when you attempt to vote on the sub-budget that directly relates to your employment or that of a near relative or family member. And I know some of you are new this year, so I wanted to go over that. It is a personal decision of the member. The body as a whole cannot instruct you. I do try to advise people on an individual basis as to what that conflict can entail. But I would advise that in a traditional sense, that when you're in the sub-budget process, that you not exercise and you can abstain voting. It does not mean that you have to abstain from entering into the debate. That's called a recusal. You're not required to recuse yourself from the entire debate. You are, in certain instances, required to abstain from voting if that matter appears to be a personal conflict. So with those instructions, that will carry through for the entire 4 days as you go over every budget and sub-budget in the town. If you're particularly affected by that sub-budget, I would recommend abstention. At the very end of the budget process, when they're all commingled, you're rather distant at that point from any involvement, and you can cast a vote for the general total town budget of the town of Waterford. I hope that's helpful. So with those admonitions, I would ask that you begin the first substantive vote of the town budget tonight. And I'll answer questions.
Nick Gorthy, I think you had your hand raised. You got a question for the town attorney?
No, it wasn't for the town attorney. It was before we had the vote on the motion, but I wasn't recognized.
We already had the motion to end debate has prevailed. So we are preparing for amendment.
Mike Bono, I think you raised your hand during the town attorney's comments.
Yes, Mr. Avina, being a new member of the RTM, I have a question. Hope you can help me out with a simple yes or no, because that was I was a little confused at your statement there. Is there a case for an ethics violation if you vote on a budgetary matter that affects your personal financial interest?
Yes, we do have an ethics ordinance in town. It's section 2.50 of our chapter of ordinances. The issue of whether or not someone has ethically violated by voting in their personal interest has to be advanced to that commission, and it is only the commission decision that determines whether or not there's been an ethical conflict that occurred. The sections that I am referring to tonight are from those ethical ordinances, and they're basically saying that if you have an immediate connection to your vote, it's different than whether it's a distant connection to the vote. And that's up to the Ethics Commission to decide that distinction. Generally speaking, if you are voting and a general group of which you are part of will or not benefit, that's part of the consideration. In other words, there is no easy answer, but I have always traditionally taken the position as I do on every board, including our Planning and Zoning Commission, when in doubt, when you think you have any personal interest involved, abstaining is perfectly fine. That's why we've got more than like 3 members on every board. So abstaining is a fine action to take in certain instances, and I try to advise people individually if they contact me.
What's that?
All right, let's go to the vote.
Vote on the proposed cut of $470,000. A yes vote in favor of the cut. A no vote, you're not in favor of the cut. Ask the town clerk to take a roll call vote, please.
A yes is for the cut, a no is against the cut. Mr. Attanasio,
No.
Mr. Bono,
I must abstain.
Ms. Brashali,
Yes.
Ms. Cairns,
Abstain.
Mr. Condon,
Yes.
Mr. Dembeck,
Yes.
Ms. Driscoll,
Yes.
Mr. Elsey,
No.
Mr. Fioravanti,
Abstain.
Ms. Furry Wagner,
No.
Mr. Gauthier,
Definitely no.
Mr. Goldstein,
Yes.
Ms. Cole,
No.
Mr. Lurch,
Yes.
Ms. Mativier,
Abstain.
Mr. Morgan,
Yes.
Mr. Muckle,
Yes.
Mr. O'Leary,
Yes.
Mr. Olinsu,
Yes.
Ms. Ritchie,
Yes.
Mr. Rocchetti,
Yes.
Ms. Stewart Linus,
Yes.
Mr. Swanson,
Yes.
Mr. Welch Collins,
No.
Fourteen to 6 to 4 abstaining. Motion passed. 14 to 6. What? Yep. The total was 14 yes, 6 no, 4 abstentions. Kim, can you give us a new total, please?
$50,372,315.
And we're gonna do final action.
The new subtotal, as the finance director just announced, $50,372,315. Any discussion before we take it to a vote?
This is on the new total. Oh, we got a hand raised. Nick, go up here.
Can I ask a question of the administrator, superintendent, or not?
I don't see why not. Go ahead, ask a question.
So this point, I guess, was brought up multiple times that if we make a cut, that they can come back later and ask for more revenue or more money. Is that true, and how does that work?
That request would come from the Board of Education and not me directly. And depending on town charter or statutes, I'm not sure if it has to go to the Board of Finance and then to you. But yes, a Board of Education can request additional funds from a municipality.
How long would that process take?
This is Town Attorney Rob Avina. I believe it would initiate with the Board of Finance and then move directly to the RTM we've done those over a time period of less than 30 days.
Kathleen Cole, I think you're asking for the floor.
Tim Fioravanti. Who? Oh, okay. Doesn't have her hand up though.
Mr. Moderator?
I think it's Tim's got
Mr. Bonte, yes, sir, you got the floor.
Yes, may I get the number of the cut again? 400 and how many thousand dollars?
70.
470,000. Whose? I don't know. It's not happening on mine. Jen Brashali has her hand up.
Then you have the floor.
Mr. Vina, if that were an emergency to get that money, would it be possible to get that in less than 30 days?
Absolutely. I think our record might be 10 to 14.
Thank you.
You gotta take it. There's a standing motion.
We're back to standing motion on the Board of Education budget, $15,372,315. We'll take it to a roll call vote. Unless, Mike Buchetti, got your hand up.
He put it down.
I'm all set, Tom.
Mr. Attanasio.
Yes.
Mr. Attanasio. Yes. Mr. Bono.
Need to abstain?
Ms. Brashali.
Yes.
Ms. Cairns.
Abstain?
Mr. Condon.
Yes.
Mr. Dembeck.
Yes.
Ms. Driscoll.
Yes.
Ms. Driscoll.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Mr. Elsey.
No.
Mr. Fioravanti.
Abstain.
Ms. Puri Wagner.
No.
Mr. Gauthier.
No.
Mr. Goldstein.
Yes.
Ms. Cole.
No.
Mr. Lurch.
Shucks.
Mr. Lurch. Ms. Mativier.
Abstain?
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Mr. Muckle.
Yes.
Mr. O'Leary.
Yes.
Mr. Olinstu.
Yes.
Ms. Ritchie.
Yes.
Mr. Rocchetti.
Yes.
Ms. Stewart-Gelinas.
Yes.
Mr. Swanson.
Yes.
Mr. Welch Collins.
No.
Back to Mr. Lurch. He's saying yes. He's holding up a sign.
David?
We got it, Mr. Lurch.
David?
Yes.
Change my vote to no.
No. Okay. Sorry, Greg.
We're talking to Mike Buchetti.
14 to 6 with 4 people abstaining. Motion passes.
Motion passes 14 to 6 with 4 people abstaining. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting till tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock.
So moved.
So moved.
Collins?
The recess?
You're right, Susan. Recess. So at 6 o'clock tomorrow evening.
Second.
I had Welch Collins and then Muckle seconding. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? The ayes have it. The meeting is recessed at 8:15 till tomorrow night. Thank you.
What time?
Excuse me, 6 o'clock. It's 8:15 right now. 6 o'clock tomorrow night, excuse me.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. Keep in mind to lower your hand when you're done, when you've raised them and going down, and stay on mute. We did a great job, though. Thank you very much for your cooperation.
Thanks. Thank you, Dave.
Dave, you have